Hey guys, and welcome to the Lunge Lift podcast. Today we are talking about a subject which is very near to my heart, which is fat loss and differences between fat loss and weight loss. Some of the best strategies that Ash and myself have maybe come across with doing through our own practices or with clients, and a few other experiences that we've gone through that can hopefully benefit you and your journeys. So Ash, shall we start off fat loss and weight loss?
Yeah.
That's the big thing with this. You see a lot of time, I want to lose weight. It's like, do you really want to lose weight, or do you actually want to lose body fat? Do you just want to look better?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that, words can be so powerful in terms of creating an image in your mind. Like the word fat as well has so much meaning embedded within it that, the whole low fat movement, people think if I eat fat, that means I get fat because it's the same word. And that's not true, as we'll talk about in a bit. And fat loss versus weight loss, I think, is a key point that I emphasize to all my clients who are looking for improved body composition, where most people, unless they're competing in a weight class sport, don't actually care about how much they weigh. They mainly care about how they look, and how they look is usually a function of their body fat percentage and their lean muscle mass. Like how muscular are you and how lean are you will give most people a better indicator of the quality of their aesthetic physique. So focusing on losing weight can actually be quite a detrimental approach, where people feel like they're not making progress, but actually they are moving towards their goal. Like I was just saying to you now, I had a client this morning who was saying they're frustrated with their weight plateauing on the scales, but then they said they received compliments that their arms were looking more muscular, that they were looking leaner, and they said their love handles had got smaller. And I was like, well, that's actually what you care about. You don't care whether you're this many kilos or that many kilos. If you look better, then that's what aesthetics is all about, rather than body mass. And I think that's a key distinction, that focusing on what really matters to you rather than your weight. Just a bit of a hangover from old ways of talking, I think.
Yeah, I think definitely as the fitness industry as a whole is relatively new, realistically. Only really in the past, say, like 20 odd years has it really kind of started, and only really recently in the past like 15 has it really started to transform. And because it's really in reality how new it is, the words that are used or perceptions that are had, nothing wrong with the way things used to be, but I think where people say look online at, say, not nothing necessarily bad, but say bodybuilding.com, Men's Health, stuff like that, there's a lot of dogma on those type of websites at times. Same as like when people read the Daily Mail to find out if they got the latest news. It's like a lot of the time that is bullshit.
Oh, gotcha.
But Men's Health have provided some great information, and I started off Men's Health with my journey. Like I remember getting the little leaflet, like the pamphlet thing, 6 weeks of six pack, and you're just like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna get a six pack in 6 weeks. I'm gonna follow this ab routine, and I'm gonna eat this food, and it's gonna get me lean. And this was like back in probably 2010, around that, and it's just like before I got into fitness, and I was like, why am I not lean?
Yeah.
I'm eating the chicken and broccoli and I'm eating this, and what's going on? So I think the words, as you mentioned, that were used is weight is not a bad thing. How much you weigh, it really doesn't matter unless you're competing in a weight class sport. But reducing your body fat, and also not feeling ashamed that you want to reduce your body fat and look better. That's something that I know we've discussed before, and it's don't be ashamed to say, I want to look better, I want to have abs, or there's nothing wrong. It's not vain. It's not that. It's you want to look better. And that's only based on what you feel, not based on someone else's results. And we're going to touch on this a little bit later, like when it comes to obviously judging like bodybuilding and stuff like that, it's different. But, you're basing your journey off of how you look and how happy you are in your skin. And if that means to being, say, for a guy, 18% body fat, and you're really happy with who you are and how you feel, that's completely fine. But then don't bash on someone that wants to be 10%, because that's maybe where they feel fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, spot on. So how do you do it, mate? How do you lose fat? What's the secret? When's the ebook coming out?
So this is my ebook's coming out soon. My journey with fat loss, as anyone that's known me, has been definitely a yo-yo one. I could say a classic yo-yo dieter, but not in necessarily a bad way per se, because a lot of the times I've tried different strategies to say reduce my body fat or lose weight, however you want to class it, is in like, and to see one, how it feels. Because if I'm trying to tell a client how to say you need to lose weight and this is how you should do it, I want to understand the journey that they're going through. So when they come to me and say, Rob, man, I need some carbs, I'm like, no, I'm low carb guy. You can't eat carbs, and that's the only way you can lose fat. Obviously, that's not the case, and that's what I think has been a massive eye opener for me over, say, the 8 to 10 years that I've been, say, yo-yoing, as we say. So going from competing in a bodybuilding competing in 2 bodybuilding shows. One was more of a fitness model one where I had no idea. Before I hired a coach or anything like that, I fasted. I did steady state cardio. I did intervals. I had low carbs. I felt like shit. I lost a load of business when it comes to PT because it's my head was all in the transformation, but I didn't have any energy for anything outside of that. And this was back when I first started, and I was thinking to get clients, I've got to be lean, I've got to be in shape, and it's just yes, that's important to a degree, but at the same time, it wasn't be all and end all, which I then discovered when I then did my second. I did an actual bodybuilding competition where in that competition I placed second, and I was happy with that because the person that did beat me, he had more striated glutes, so he definitely deserved to beat me, and I was happy with that. But the difference in how I got there, I tracked my calories. I was eating carbs when I was training hard. I was having a bit lower carbs when I wasn't training as hard, and I was being consistent. And that is the thing. I hired a coach that gave the accountability side of things. He set up my training for me. So again, it was one less stress, because obviously stress is a big inhibitor at times. So I essentially handed all the pressure over to someone else. So they said, right, I'm going to prep you for a show in 6 months it was. And I started at 105 kilos and finished at 86 kilos. So the transformation was massive. And, when I look at, I had like a picture of me in the bedroom of like when I first started, lat spread like this, and then and towards the end where I was in my like banana hammock thing. Yeah. But again, the difference, I was just like, fuck me. And it just, back then again, I was like 24, 25, so, when I didn't have any other stresses in life and stuff, and that was my only priority, and I did it, and I was really happy with it. Yeah. So I know we're talking about how do you lose fat, and the number one thing is being consistent, I'd say, with a calorie deficit. Yeah. There are other things that can obviously say enhance the journey or inhibit it. But the main thing is that you're consistent and that you're monitoring so you can make changes at the right time rather than just pissing in the wind and seeing like, I'll just do this now. I'll just do it. And that was my first fat loss journey. My first fat loss journey was I'm going to do every single strategy that I know or that I've heard of and see what works rather than sticking with a plan. And then when it starts to stall a little bit, which it inevitably does, to make a little change and then watch what happens. And we're just... we're a culture of instant gratification, and that was even me 6-7 years ago now. And you want it now, and when it doesn't come now, we'll carry on a bit later in the podcast about other things that I've done. But what about yourself? How have you? Because obviously you've been through fat loss journeys, and you're currently in probably the best shape of your life. I will say you're pretty good shape. Doing all right.
Yeah, lockdown life makes things easy. I've played around with a few different things. I think I did. If it fits your macros at uni for a bit. Basically, I've used opportunities where I've lived quite a Spartan life to experiment a little bit, and thinking about the times when I've gone after fat loss. One was when I was doing my finals at uni. So I had about six weeks or so when I wasn't drinking, wasn't going out, was just like revising or going to the gym and controlling what I ate. So that was probably, not even if it fits your macros, just really clean eating, making sure I hit my protein and having a rough idea of how many calories. And because that was the first time I'd really consciously gone after it, I did, probably get leaner than I'd ever been at that point. I did feel probably quite grouchy throughout, but maybe that was just the stress of revising for finals as well. Who knows? Other times I've played with keto and intermittent fasting quite a lot, and actually really like them. For me, I still do intermittent fasting now. Like, I don't eat breakfast, so I started eating about 12, try and finish eating by about 8-ish. And the reason that I actually stick with that, not for fat loss reasons, but for cognitive function. I feel really sharp. I do most of my work in the morning, feel dialed in and don't feel hungry. I just feel my energy levels are nice and consistent. Keto I did for a while, and I felt similar, but it's more stressful. I feel like you're on that border of actually under eating quite easily, because you are so full from eating loads and loads of fat that you can actually have an excessive calorie deficit, and training suffers. Like, anything that's at all high intensity or glycolytic is just a write-off. Like, I remember doing some work. I'll do like a set of 10 and I'll need 5 minutes rest. So I'm just so gassed. So yeah, it wasn't great. I think I was working at a CrossFit gym in Oz at the time, and just work, like, anything that's low intensity is fine, but as soon as you crank it up, there's not much in the gas tank. So that felt great, except when training is how typical keto. It's also quite inconvenient trying to eat out and stay keto, just getting enough fat in, because I was doing it more pure keto, where it's sort of like 70 to 80% of your calories from fat, which is very high. It's quite contrarian in that there are no normal meals that have that macro profile. No. So if you're not eating at home, it's very difficult, and you end up just going off plan. And whenever you come out of ketosis, it feels rough getting back in. Though I was experimenting.
I think a lot of people, just on that, I think is they misunderstand low carb for keto, and they then have, say, high protein and high fat, and then no carbs. It's I'm keto. It's like, well, actually, if you want to do pure keto, as you say, like proper keto, you're more towards 70 to 80% fat, low protein, and next to no carbs.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing to say about ketos. Like, you need to check that you're actually in ketosis. So whether you get a one of the finger prick tests, you can get a blood ketone monitor. I think they're relatively expensive because it's a few pounds per test, and if you want to be testing multiple times a day, it's also sore on the fingers. Mm-hmm. Or you can get the piss sticks, where it will show you whether you're in ketosis or not, which is what I had. And just building an awareness of when you're in and when you're out of it. By the end, I could feel it. Like, you sort of get this change. It's like this hungry alertness when you switch over to burning fats. And I also cheated a little bit in that I was using exogenous ketones. So you can get ketone sachets, which were really useful for smoothing out the transition. So say on the weekend I was eating out and drinking, to get back into ketosis on the Monday, it would normally be quite rough. But if you have some exogenous ketones, you can give yourself that energy. So you're not burning your own fat, but you are still burning fat, and you feel pretty good. It's like a coffee plus to have the caffeine and the ketones.
Yeah, because there's quite a lot of it would be quite, I don't know how much you've experienced many of them, because there's different per individual, but that transition into ketosis is like, there's a lot of that brain fog, where pretty much also when you crash from not having the carbs. So there's quite a lot of things that happen to you. But once you come out the other side, you then feel great. And that's where a lot of people are like, that's why so many people swear by keto. But I know we're going to touch on other bits in a bit, but keto is definitely something as an interesting strategy. But if you're a trainer, like, and you're training, I think that's definitely where you might need to relook at your strategy.
Yeah, if you care about performing and training really hard, then you have to have carbs. Like, you're not going to maximize your performance without carbs. And basically, since I started running, carbs have become more important if I don't have carbs. Well, I can't remember the last time I had a day without carbs now, because anything like doing 400-meter repeats without carbs in the tank, one will be all right, but the other 9 probably wouldn't. And so those are sort of the main 2 or 3 times I've tried to lean out. Fasting, I find, is one of my preferred methods. It's almost like batching your cutting. So you just, rather than reducing the calories of every meal across 3 to 5 meals, you just do the not eating all in one go. And then you can have, the reason I really like it is that I like to eat big meals. So I can have 2 massive meals and still be in a deficit. And you sort of never feel like you're cutting or you're going without food. I think that whole fasting keto thing, I need to double check on the science, but it does feel like you're training your body to use your fat stores more. And I think, having spent a lot of time playing around with keto and fasting now, I'm a lot more resilient to hunger than other people. Like when I was younger, and when I was doing that sort of, if it fits your macros, eating 5-6 times a day, if it got to 3 or 4 hours without a meal, I would be ravenous. My stomach would be almost cramping because I was so hungry. Whereas nowadays I could go 24 hours without eating without really batting an eyelid, and other people around me would be complaining. I was like, that was no big deal.
So I think is something that I definitely want the listeners to understand as well, is obviously these are our experiences. So neither of us are nutritionists, but we've definitely, dealt with a lot of people and helped them made them reach their goals through nutritional strategies and training strategies. Also, we've both worked closely alongside, say, PH Nutrition and Liam, particularly from there, the owner of PH Nutrition. We've done a podcast with him at the start. So if you haven't listened to that, go back to that one where we actually discuss some of these topics. But for me, when it comes to fasting, it's something which I've loved. But as soon as I stop fasting, and so I don't fast anymore in the mornings, I then become reliant upon my breakfast. And I've lost the ability to not eat for a certain amount of time. It feels, and it takes about a week for me to kind of get back to the discomfort and being okay with that. But then it doesn't become uncomfortable, because obviously the reason I'm starting is because I don't want to go too deep into the rabbit hole of nutrition, because I've got to know my place and what we can, and what both got to know our place and what we can say. But we both do a lot of reading on these sort of subjects, and fasting, for anyone that hasn't looked into it before, knows there are so many health benefits to do with fasting, for longevity, for satiation, for just brain cognitive function. And so there's many benefits with it. And the negatives, there don't seem to really be any in particular that has come about, really. Now, fasting in particular is a really nice way, as you say, to batch your calories, so that if you are someone that eats regularly, you can then put your calories into a shorter window, which makes you feel fuller. Because the problem with eating too frequently is you're never giving your time to not being digesting, so you're always digesting food. So that's taking up energy in your body. So being in a calorie deficit is probably the number one focus for anyone wanting to be in a fat loss journey. How you get about that is completely down to you, whether that is through cutting out your calories in the morning through fasting, and then having all your set calories in the afternoon and evening, or that might be through just low carb, that might be through keto, that might be through high carb and low fat. There are many benefits to each strategy, but it's about finding the one that works for you, that you could be consistent with. And the most important part with all of this is it something that you can do for your lifetime? Because that's what a diet is. A diet is something that you eat day in and day out without necessarily a particular goal in mind. Is how you function. And then you have to tweak your diet one way or another to start achieving your goals. So if you wanted to go through a bit of a fat loss period, you're going to probably reduce your calories slightly. And then if you want to, say, add on some slides or perform a little harder, you're going to have to eat some more food. So when it comes to understanding your how many calories is right for you, it's always worth tracking your food for the first time, because a lot of people don't actually understand, firstly, what's in food, how much protein, what protein looks like, or what foods even got protein in. Some people are not aware of that. Same as carbs and fats. So understanding how many calories you eat in a day without you trying to eat towards any goal is really important, because it gives you an idea of maintenance calories.
Yeah.
So that way you can pretty much stay at the same who you are and feel good and just not really change your body composition. And you can monitor that by tracking your food and then tracking your weight and just checking that. Obviously, you're going to have daily fluctuations, so that's normal, but just making sure it's relatively consistent. So when it comes to fat loss, what have you found has been quite a successful strategy that you've used with clients and has really helped them, say, achieve their fat loss goals?
I think the overarching consistent theme, like you've just said, is the adherence. So rather than having a perfect plan in mind and saying, right, this is the way you lose fat, everyone's gonna do this, like doing a super strict keto intermittent fasting diet, for example, that's so far away from where most people are that it's completely unrealistic to expect them to stick to it in any way, shape or form. So like you've just said there, the first thing I do is establish a baseline. So what do you do day to day that has you in the shape that you are now? And what's the change that we can make that offers the most benefit for the least inconvenience? So we know what you like to do or what feels good to you or natural to you at the moment. Say you're having 4 cans of Coke, we could switch those to 4 cans of Diet Coke, and already, or even changing one of them to Diet Coke, you probably wouldn't feel the difference, but we've already created a good sized calorie deficit there. And if you just carried on doing that, weight should start to drop off, and you haven't even felt it, because like they don't taste exactly the same, but they taste similar. It's the same. It's like smoking. The Nicorette sort of fake cigarettes have a higher percentage to support somebody quitting than the patches, because it's the habit. You notice the absence of cigarettes if you don't have something to have in your hand. And the first thing is all the easy levers. So like, what are the habits which you won't miss, which we can just iron out and immediately create a bit of a calorie deficit. From there, it's just about incremental changes towards habits that will support fat loss. So if we're worried about the person not feeling full, can we add in some more vegetables that have volume so you feel like your stomach is full but less calories? Is it that fasting is a great one. Can we push back your breakfast so that you eat later and later and later? So eventually you end up with a smaller eating window, which means you're going to feel better off less calories.
But I thought breakfast is the most important meal of the day, no?
Yeah, that's what Mum said. And joking, love you, Mum. But I think that's the key thing, is there's no one strategy that works for everyone. It's about adherence, and adherence boils down to how do you feel. So if you feel good on a diet or a nutrition strategy, you're way more likely to stick to it. If you've got low energy, you feel hungry all the time, you're not able to eat the foods that you like to eat, you're probably going to be a bit resentful of the diet plan and come off it very frequently, which means you're not going to stay in your calorie deficit. The practicality is also huge for people living and working in London. They've got very busy, stressful lives. So just setting yourself up for success. Fasting could be a great one because it actually saves you time. Like I get up and I don't need to make breakfast. So that's immediately a time saving every single day. Obviously, meal prep is a huge part of that. If you can just batch cook a bunch of meals so they're ready to go, rather than grabbing something less healthy or less in line with
less nutritious. Yeah,
exactly. How about you?
So yeah, it's quite funny because it's like, it's, as I say, about making things easy and about getting those mini wins. And for me, it does obviously depend on where the client comes to you, if they've trained before, if they're currently training and then want to reach a fat loss goal, if they have never trained and then they want to reach a fat loss goal. Because if you, using these two examples, if you've never trained and you've come to me and say, right, I want to lose weight for a wedding, then and you don't train at all, I could not touch your diet at all and get you training and you start to lose weight, because you're going to be in a calorie deficit by increasing your output.
Yeah.
So it's not always about cutting food. And one of my pillars that I try to always base especially my fat loss clients, they're off is give stuff before taking away. And that will be, if you have the time, it will be, let's do more work rather than take away food. Because taking away food is, once you've started doing that, it's just a downward spiral. You get down to barely any calories and no one's having a good time there.
Yeah, you've got nowhere to go.
Exactly, right? So if I can get you, say, training an extra, say, 2 times a week, whether that's going for a walk every morning, whether that's doing a little bit of light cardio 2 times a week, just trying to do more output. But sometimes, as you say, with the busy clients, they don't have time to do more work. So then they're the type of people where you have to focus more on the nutritional strategy, because that's where you're going to get your easy wins. But an easy win for me is always increasing output rather than dropping calories. And then when you stall, that's then where you can start to say, right, okay, now let's maybe drop the calories, because I don't want you training 7 to 9 times a week, because then you're going to not recover as well. Yeah. So then you've got, there's so many factors to this. And this is why it's obviously we're both coaches, and this is essentially a plug for us both. This is why it's important to hire a coach. One, because we've been through these type of things ourselves most of the time, so we have empathy in those situations. But also because it's another stress that you most likely don't need in your life. There's some other stresses that you don't want to think, oh, fuck, how many calories I've got to eat today? What output have I got to do? What training is going to be good for me? And one of the reasons why we wanted to do this episode today is because we both work in a CrossFit facility, or have worked, and we have clients that train CrossFit, and a lot of them have aesthetics goal alongside that, and they want to look better. Now, obviously, with all these, due to there being so many strategies to lose body fat, it's important to, one, say, hire a nutritionist, like say someone like Liam, obviously from PH Nutrition. He can obviously say guide you through that way, or make sure you're just fueling yourself for those workouts, because eating for a bodybuilding style session is going to be very different to eating for a CrossFit session. Now, what I mean by this is, if your chosen methodology for training is a more output-based, intensity-based model like CrossFit, where it takes cognitive function, so you need to remember how to do a skill, you need to have obviously energy on fast demand, and so you need that side of stuff, compared to say a bodybuilding style where you're mainly focusing on, maybe supersets is the most intense thing you do, so 2 exercises back to back. So the type of nutrition protocol that you need for that will be very different to the type of nutrition protocol for CrossFit. Have you found, because obviously you've worked in both commercial and in a box, have you found your clients have struggled with this sometimes, not fully understanding the right why behind what they need to do?
Yeah, I think it's a common misconception that carbs are evil, and a lot of people go low carb and then they absolutely bonk. So, well, when I was in Australia, there was a big keto movement, sort of when I was doing it as well, and a lot of the members at the box I worked at struggled with the keto flu as they sort of adapted to fat burning, and it meant that a lot of people actually broke their keto diet because they're just like so desperate for carbs because their training was suffering. And there is a fork in the road there. You've got to choose: am I committed to going keto and getting this adaptation and actually getting into ketosis, and I'm willing to make performance sacrifices to get there, or actually is my CrossFit performance more important and keto is just not the strategy for me, which is probably more accurate for most people. I think same as always, like being clear on whether your focus is aesthetics versus performance, and what are you willing to sacrifice to pursue either of them, makes the value call very straightforward. So am I willing to let my training performance suffer for aesthetic goals, or is there a compromise where I can still perform at a level I'm happy with and lose fat? One thing I wanted to come back to, which I really liked about what you just said, was creating a deficit through exercise rather than food. And one thing I often say to my clients is trying to eat as much as you can while still losing weight. The higher your calories are, the more food you can eat, the more likely you are to hit all of your micronutrients as well. So obviously there's protein, carbs, fats as the macronutrients, but beneath that you've got all the vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids and everything that you need from your diet, which is a lot more granular. If you're eating 2,000 calories of food, there's just more volume of substance there that's likely to contain those micronutrients. If you're eating 1,200 calories of food, it's much less likely that the total amount of all those vitamins and minerals are in there. So from a health perspective, you're giving yourself a much better chance of being covered there. Also with the 1,200 calorie extremely low diet, there is nowhere else to go. So once you've reduced your calories down to really, really low, if you're then plateauing and not losing weight, you can't reduce them further, because then, well, I mean, you can obviously reduce it down to zero, but that's not where anyone really wants to be. So staying in an area where you're still able to lose fat without an extreme deficit means that you're going to continue to lose fat for longer. Whereas if you've like jumped your calories down super low, you will plateau, like you said. The body gets used to whatever you repeatedly do to it.
Yeah.
Then that's it.
I think with just so understanding whether, like you just said, if fat loss is your goal and your training is based around fat loss, or if it's, say, you train CrossFit, so that performance is a bit more your goal, you do need to understand that, because what Ash said there just made me remember one of the things. So going in extreme calorie deficits for short periods of time, say like 4 weeks, is a completely viable option. You could have pretty much low calories, get your weight right down and body fat right down, and understand that performance is going to go to shit. You're probably going to feel like shit. You understand that it's a short-term thing, and you're not having this, say, 1,000 calorie diet for forever. You're using it as a short-term, say, bump in a way to get you going. And this is this is a valid option. And I think for some people, say, they have a holiday in 4 weeks. This is crazy, and I know you've definitely had it. Oh, right, I'm going on Ibiza in 4 weeks. I want to be as shredded as possible. It's like, so then they go on this like 1,000 calorie diet. They get onto the plane. They've got abs and everything. By the time they get off their plane, where they've had a couple of beers on the plane, they're a bit puffy, and they're like, fuck's sake, they've just gone to the beach. I'm now looking puffy. Then they go to bed, and they wake up the next day, and they're back to being a bit leaner again. It's sweet. And then just through that week, all you see is just deterioration of their physique, because they're drinking, they're eating shit most of the time, and they're putting their body into a state it hasn't been in.
Yeah.
And now the reason why I'm touching on this is because playing in the long run, and the long game, is so important when it comes to fat loss. And yes, you having intermediate goals of, say, like weddings, holidays, stuff, that is a great way to motivate you. But motivation is there just to get you started. It doesn't keep you there for the long run, which is why it's so important to be following a nutritional strategy that fits in with your life.
It's sustainable,
and exactly, because if you've got a wedding, that, say, using a wedding as an example, or even a holiday nowadays, actually, I suppose people are going on holiday left, right, and centre now. But if, say, a wedding, using that one as an example, most of the time it's going to be in a year's time. Don't wait till 6 weeks out from your wedding. Shit, I need to fit into a dress, because or your suit. Because if you give yourself the thing, you planned a wedding in a year, why not start your fat loss journey now, as slow as possible, and make it as least impactful as possible on your body, but get the most results. So when it comes to you getting like your dress fitting or suit fitting, you're not actually changing that much in body shape, rather than, you get your first dress or suit fitting, and then you suddenly lose a load of weight, and it's, now it doesn't fit, now to get it taken in. And it's the thing which I touched on at the start of trying to come away from instant gratification and understand that play the long game.
Yeah.
And it sounds so boring. Oh, play the long game, do it slow. But if you want to make the change for the last time, I'm going to put this commitment on this podcast. I'm trying to go for my last fat loss journey, essentially. Not saying that I want to walk around shredded all the time, but I do want to be in a bit better nick than I am now. So I am putting myself through a steady fat loss journey so that I can be walking around where I feel comfortable all the time. And it's understanding that it's going to take time.
I think that's really important, that you want to be in good shape forever. Not many people would want to be in good shape for a really short period of time. Bodybuilders, and I think this is a hangover from bodybuilding, where they're prepping for a show because they need to be unsustainably lean when they step on stage, but none of them look like that even the next day. It's literally one day they look insane, but it's totally unsustainable, and a lot of them actually have problems coming out of those physiques as their hormones have changed and their metabolism's really low. So there's a huge amount of work they need to do just to bring them back to normal life and able to maintain even just a normal body composition, eating normal food, because they've done so much damage to their systems. What people really want is to get lean and stay lean forever in a sustainable way, and it's a slower journey, but the prize is much greater. Rather than looking great for a couple of photos on the beach, then you come back home, balloon out, and then you find it even harder to get lean the next time. That's actually not what people really want. They just have that short-term goal at the front of mind, which is short-term motivation, like you said. And I think having the patience and big picture, bird's eye view to say, right, I actually want to create myself a sustainable lifestyle where I'm in good shape all the time without much effort.
Yeah.
And it takes longer to adjust your habits to get you there, but then it means that it's easy. Like, it means you can enjoy your life. You're not stressed when you go out for drinks with your mates or go for a big meal out, because you know that it still works, and the rest of the time you're on top of things.
Yeah. Okay. On that, it's especially when it comes to like bodybuilding shows in particular, you'll actually notice a lot of pro bodybuilders now don't get so far out of show shape as they used to. They used to off season, like dirty bulk, balloon up, and these are even people with assistants, adding, getting help with their, like, through steroids and so forth. But they then realize that how badly their hormones and stuff get impacted by eating poorly, and their training goes to shit. So they're actually negating potential gains, and a lot of them now stay quite close to show shape, not like that shredded, but as you mentioned there, like the psychology side of it, like the amount. So when I competed both times, is in like after the show, I remember, so obviously I've peaked all the way down to 85 kilos, right? So 86 kilos. I then post after that, I had 3 Domino's pizzas, 2 boxes of cookies, and some ice cream, and that's like a Ben and Jerry's thing. And I felt I had the biggest pump the next day. I mean, I was like, the veins and everything, I looked unreal the next day, but I felt very uncomfortable. But the problem is then I was just like, okay, fine, that I felt good. But it then didn't stop there. It was then, okay, I've just restricted myself for 6 months. I took 6 months to lose that weight. So I then, I just restricted myself for 6 months, even though it was with a coach and stuff. I'm now going to eat this. I'm now going to eat this. Even though he was like, right, we should probably reverse diet a little bit, up your calories, not really slowly, but start to reintroduce a bit more food so your training can come back up. But I was, fuck it, I'm just going to start eating everything again. And I was back up to 95 very quickly. And you got to think that's 10 kilos. It took me 6 months to lose, say, 20, right? So say 3 months to lose 10, but it took me probably a few days to put that 10 kilos back on. One, there was then water weight and stuff. So I'm not saying I put on 10 kilos of fat. Let's just be very clear. Yeah. But the problem is so a book that I always recommend to all my clients and everyone is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And not because he's saying anything revolutionary in that book, like, oh, you need to make like all the good habits that create a better life, but it's how he says things. But something that always really resonated with me is I've got lean quite a few times, but I've never changed the type of person that I am. I'm always Big Rob, the one that can eat all the food, that I enjoy eating all the pizzas and the Domino's and all this stuff, right? Now, in my mind, there's nothing wrong with enjoying having a big meal. But the problem is what that normally then leads to the next day. It's not a one-off. It then normally sets people off onto a spiral, or I'll start on Monday. Now, becoming the person that, say, has 2 pizzas rather than 3 pizzas better, or just 1 pizza, and understanding that being hungry is okay at times, and it's changing the person that you are to make sure that these results are sustainable. Because when I got down to 86 kilos, say, I was still 100 kilo Rob in my mind. I just weigh 86 kilos, but I still had all the habits. I had the appetite, I had everything of that 100 kilo Rob, which is why I've always ballooned back to set at around 100 kilos, because this is the type of person, this is where I feel comfortable. But I don't necessarily want to be here. So I need to create some struggles and get myself down to say around 95 and become a 95 kilo Rob rather than a 100 kilo Rob. Now, 5 kilos might not sound like much, but that is the difference between me just eating willy-nilly and me being a bit more conscious about my eating. And that's a big difference between yourself and myself. And I know it's like watching your, say, like your lockdown diet and how you eat and you're being Mr. Consistent and so forth, is you focus on being really consistent day in, day out. And then when you have your burgers or your beers on those days, that's it. But then the next day you're back at it. And it's not then using, okay, I have burgers and beers on a Thursday. That means I'm gonna eat a pizza tonight, and then Saturday I'm gonna just have some KFC. Not that I eat KFC, but then Sunday, fuck it, I'll start on Monday. Do you know what I mean? That's the different mindset that you need. And with a fat loss journey, this is important. You got to understand it's a journey, so you have to enjoy the process. You're gonna go through struggles. You're gonna feel hungry, because that's part of it. But understand that. I like to think of it as not a game, but in a way like, I'm hungry. Yes, I am probably losing body fat. My body's using fuel. So I'm using it as a positive thing rather than, oh man, I really want to fuel my hunger. I'm actually purposely getting myself hungry to feel that sense of satisfaction. Even though I'm making sure at the end of the day I've hit my calories that I'm supposed to and so forth. Yeah. But I'm using hunger as a positive.
Yeah, really nice, mate. I think that's really good for people to hear. And I think it all comes back around to what we were saying earlier in terms of incrementally making a sustainable lifestyle. So I am very consistent now, but I don't feel like I'm suffering or like doing myself a hardship. I love what I eat. I look forward to my brunch every single day, and it's delicious and it's filling, and it also ticks my boxes nutritionally. And that's the culmination of years of sort of figuring out what works for me, where I can get away with stuff. And some people might see it as a very restricted diet. Well, I think it's great. Well, I get to eat stuff that I love, and it makes me feel good. It lets me train how I want to train and keeps me in shape. And I think that as a mindset versus, I have to eat eggs and oats, like, that's so shit. Some people might see it that way, whereas I'm like, this is delicious. And
I love eggs and oats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think being kind to yourself and sort of slowly leading yourself down the path to getting to health, as long as it's the direction of change is always positive. There's no need to try and skip ahead to go from, a junk food diet and alcohol all the time to super clean, absolutely nothing that's could be perceived as unhealthy. You're going to feel that and you're going to resent it. So just slow changes, moving in the right direction, I think is what leads to that long-term sustainable good shape.
Because you don't want to be that weirdo at the party, not eating some cake on your birthday. It's like, I'm not eating cake today because I'm following this diet at the moment where I need to only eat this amount of calories. I can't fit that in today. So it's just like, don't get me wrong. We've mentioned before, you're gonna need to go through periods of not eating the cake.
Yeah.
But there's gonna be some days where fuck it. I'm gonna eat the cake because it's worth it, and or you're gonna go for some drinks with your friends and have a big dinner and feel like shit the next day, and then you might have a pizza and stuff like that the next day. But then it doesn't need to roll on to the next day. So if you go on a Friday night, Saturday might be a bit of a write-off, but Sunday doesn't need to be. That can be your day. Don't wait till Monday. Just then crack back on, and you understand that you're not doing that week in and week out. Because if you're doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, week in and week out, you've got a problem. Especially because that's if you're trying to get a fat loss goal, probably won't be the best setup for you, shall we say?
Yeah, exactly. I think picking your own balance between a life that you enjoy versus a body you're happy with. There's no point having a great looking body but not enjoying your life.
No.
And equally, maybe you enjoy your life so much that it has negative impacts on your health. That's also probably not where you want to be. And just knowing where your personal balance is, like what you're willing to sacrifice to be in what sort of shape, and being realistic about it. Like, you're never going to walk around 4% body fat living a normal life. So is it worth the extreme training and diet to get there? to look 4%. For most people, it's not. For some bodybuilders, it is. And knowing where you sit on that spectrum makes it simple. It's like, yeah, I could do with having abs, but actually I really enjoy beers and pizzas on every week. So it's probably unrealistic for me to get there unless I go extreme somewhere else. Fine, then that's what you're happy with. Great. You enjoy that life, you enjoy that body, crack on.
But understand that basically every decision you make has an impact somewhere, whether it's a positive or a negative. Your life later down the line, or whether that's, adding years on, might happen in between that. Some is that day in day out, get towards you're trying to be happier and feel better about yourself, and that's the main thing. Making sure you're comfortable in your own skin and not judging yourself based off someone else. So, right, so I think that's it. I think we've kind of had a good touch on our fat loss journeys and kind of what we've done. Any more questions you've got on this subject, guys, we'd love to hear them. We're going to do a Q&A episode sometime soon, so it'd be good to kind of get a couple of your questions all in, and maybe we can bring Liam back on to get some of your specific questions answered. But as always, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends, help us grow. And if you're not subscribed already, you can find us on all the usual platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So that's the spiel done. Thanks a lot for listening, guys, and thank you for your time. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.